Everyone, and welcome to our monthly Women Leaders Summit meeting. My name is Ginger Whatley, and I will be moderating today's call. We have a great speaker today, and we will turn to her presentation in just a moment. But first, I want to go over the web conference instructions. Everyone is currently on mute so that the background noise does not become distracting for the other participants. To view today's presentation as the screens change live, please use the link that was sent to you in your email. At any time, feel free to ask a question in the comments section or go to executivesummits.org to submit your question via our chat. Feel free to ask questions and we'll make sure that all your questions are answered. For the newer participants in the group, it might be useful to review some of the main benefits you can take advantage of as a member at no additional charge. First, there are live monthly web conference meetings, one of which you are dialed into today. We hope you find these useful, and we have an excellent lineup, which you can see by going to our website schedule page. Second, we record all of these, so if you're stuck in another meeting, just log in at your leisure, and the full archives of past meetings are available to you with a number of interesting topics. Third, get to know other members. By logging in, you can see their profiles, and we are glad to make any introductions if wished. Fourth, if you're wrestling with key issues or decisions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to other members, and our site makes it easy to post questions. Fifth, we're generating executive summaries from each meeting with the key takeaways and learning nuggets so that you can reference them after the meeting and put them into action. Sixth, we know you're very busy, so we started a service where we pick out 6 of the most interesting articles among thousands of articles at hundreds of sites to keep you up to date. Next, find a mentor. This site makes it easy to reach out to other members. And finally is our Book of the Month summary that you can either read or listen to. Each month, we'll be selecting the most interesting book and summarizing the ideas so within minutes you can absorb the key takeaways. There are lots of other benefits, but we wanted to highlight some and notify you to keep a lookout for these each month. Okay, well, that takes care of all our housekeeping. Carlyn, are you on the line? Can you say hello?
Hello, everybody.
Well, Carlyn, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, just give me a second while I pull up your slides.
Okay, are we good to go?
Yes, we're good to go. Take it away.
Okay, perfect. I am getting so excited just sitting here, seeing everybody logging into the chat and saying hello from all over the country. I feel connected to all of you ladies, even though I can't see you through the screen. I'm talking into a black box, but it's so good to feel your presence. And I'm so honored to be here and get this opportunity to connect with all of you and share some of the things that I've learned and that I'm trying to put into practice in my own life. My intention today in sharing all of this is really just to be honest and authentic, like the presentation says, and to really just share all the things that I'm exploring. I don't do any of these things perfectly. I think that's something we all need to be really transparent about and just understand that being a leader is a constant journey, a constant learning experience, and something that is always humbling and always really, really fruitful if we let it be and if we allow ourselves to be open to learning and not worrying about making mistakes, but just learning from the mistakes that we do make. So thank you for letting me be here, especially during Women's History Month. And I can't wait to have a conversation and at the end take questions and connect and also hear wisdom from the group, because I really believe, as much as I've learned, all of you have your own stories and your own life curriculum that's taught you something meaningful. So feel free to share at the end when we have time to chat. So I have been an official leader of people for 10 years, about a decade, which is crazy. I can't believe that. When I stepped into leadership, I was 26. And so I had ladies on my team who were old enough to be my mother, and it was super humbling and an interesting experience. And I've just continued to learn and grow and manage different types of people. And all the different types of people I've managed have taught me different things about myself. So I can't wait to share all of the things that it is that I've learned. If we can go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about when we first get into leadership. If you can all reflect on maybe some leaders that you think are really fantastic. These are two leaders that I really love. I absolutely adore. And they're two very different types of leaders. So they both desire leadership or have gotten into leadership, and they've gone two different routes that I see not in such a comical extreme in real life usually, but you definitely see these types of leaders in real life. So you have folks like Dwight, who I adore, who when he gets into a role, somebody like this, they use the role as an opportunity to establish dominance or to feel more powerful or better than. And that ultimately comes from a place of ego, as you can, of course, see. But it's very, very obvious, leaders like this who feel the need to, because they are now in a leadership role, they have to have all the answers. They are the end all be all. They are the smartest in the room, the most powerful in the room. And these kinds of leaders elicit a very certain type of engagement and following from their folks. Then there's the other type of person who comes into leadership, like our Michael Scotts. Our Michael Scotts are people who they want to be loved at all costs. So it's the people pleasing kind of folks, the folks who, when I get into leadership, I'm going to be everyone's favorite teacher, like that kind of folk. I have to admit, I fall a little towards the Michael Scott realm of things. And that comes with its own challenges. And actually, both of these desires are looking to our people to validate something within us. They both come from ego in different ways. So the ego that wants to be liked, the ego that wants to be better than or establish themselves as better than other folks. And it's really easy to fall into this trap when you get the title of leader or manager, to let it take over and become your identity, and to need your folks to validate that you are indeed loved, or you are indeed respected or feared, or whatever it is. And if we get caught in this trap of playing the role, we can't genuinely connect with people. It puts a wall between us and them, and it doesn't allow us to be our authentic self. And so how do we make sure that we're not falling into this trap? If we can go to the next slide. So on the next slide, and I believe she's pulling it up here, but it says here at the top of the slide, to sacrifice manipulating others for mastering yourself. And that's like the number one thing I think of when I think about how to be an authentic leader. How can I let go of my need to control how other people feel about me so that I can feel good about myself? And instead, really, truly, genuinely look inward and have real self-worth and self-confidence that comes from knowing that I believe that I deserve to sit in the seat that I'm in, that I believe that I have value, that I know that I'm not the only person in the room that has value, and that I trust that the unique combination of life experience and characteristics and talents that I do possess are exactly what I should try to convey and strengthen and live through, and not try to be something else, or not try to portray an image that isn't me. And ultimately, I'm going to be more fulfilled if I get really in touch with the things that I am good at, the things that I need to feel good, and who I am. So I think this is easier said than done. Buddhist monks sit in caves for 30 years asking the question, who am I? It's not an easy question to answer. And so I think we just need to reflect and get as close to this as we can. And I think it's a question that we're answering throughout our life, but we're like asking yourself, who am I? What matters to me? What are my strengths? What do I have to give? Why am I in this leadership role? What's the purpose of my life? What do I want to do with this role I've been given, this honor I've been given to lead people, because it is an honor? How am I using it to serve their best interests? And how am I growing within the role and making sure I'm taking care of myself while I perform this role? So I think getting quiet, making sure we have the space to understand that, and reflect, really ask yourself those questions. And what do you need to be successful as a leader? So for example, for me personally, it's all about balance. And I know people talk about this all the time, but I think that for me, I need to, like, for example, right before this, I went on a bike ride outside my house. I blocked my calendar. I needed to get outside. I needed to breathe. I needed to sweat. I needed to have a minute to clear my head before I did something like this. I know that's what I need before I get on a call, so I can be really present and authentic in how I show up, and shake off some of the nerves, and just really, be able to just speak from the heart. So that's what I gave myself. So when you have different things that you're good at, or different functions of your job or your role or how you show up for people, what do you need to do those well? I can't show up great for my people and be an empathetic leader and listen if I am burned out. So I can't let myself get there. And there are warning signs and signals when I am burnt out that I have to listen to and make adjustments so that I can show up in the ways that I want to. And it's always constantly this pendulum swing. I feel like we're constantly, if this is like where we want to be, like balanced and centered in life, we're constantly falling off the balance beam in different directions, and that's okay. I think it's just recognizing and realizing when we've fallen off and then getting back towards center again. Also, this goes along with knowing your values. So living your values, like what is it that you want to embody when people interact with you? When they look back on their time on your team 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, what do they remember? How did you show up? I did this awesome exercise. Brene Brown has some really wonderful exercises and wisdom. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with her on the call, but one where you identify your personal values, and it's like 1 to 3. Like, what do you value most in life? And one of mine is being soul-centered. So for me, that means like when I think about my soul, my essence, who I am, what feels right and good to me, how do I make sure that my actions as a leader, as a mother, as a person, as a friend, as a sister are aligned with my soul? That even when I'm showing up in a corporate environment, I'm bringing that, I'm showing up from my soul. And I think that when you do that, magic happens. So what is it that you value? And every time I live into my values, every time I do that, I feel good. We know how we feel, especially when it's difficult. It's easy to live into our values when things are easy. But when you're tested, like I've had to say no to certain opportunities, or I've had to have tough conversations with people. And I always feel so fulfilled after that, even if it's hard, even if things don't go my way. And I know the reason I feel that is because I know I'm in alignment with my values. And if I'm doing that, like that's awesome. Like that's the creme de la creme. When I don't live into my values, when I can tell I'm being maybe I'm a little scared, in a situation of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or being perceived a certain way. And I don't live into my values. I'm not authentic. You guys all know how that feels. Maybe I feel a little bit slimy. Like I'm like, ugh, that didn't feel good. That interaction wasn't great. So I try to always I'm aware of what happened. Why do I have that feeling? And it's usually because I wasn't showing up authentically. I wasn't living into my values. This goes into like being honest. So this one, can be hard. It's about being honest with ourselves and honest with others. So, for me, like I said, recovering people pleaser, I have to constantly practice this in terms of giving feedback to people that need it and balancing empathy with accountability, which is a really tough balance to strike. But I've learned, and actually Kim Scott has a wonderful book called Radical Candor. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. But I read that book and it really, really revealed myself to myself because I have a hard time sometimes giving honest feedback or holding people accountable. I always want to see the best in them. I always want to assume positive intent, and that's fantastic. But when there's real performance issues or someone is really not able to do the job that you hired them to do, and you constantly kind of cover for that person or you don't hold them accountable for performance, they don't feel good because deep down they know they're not performing. And it doesn't feel good to feel like you can't do the job in the way or show up and contribute in the way you want to. The team suffers because if you're managing a team of people, they have to then take on the other person's work or work harder or more, and they start to get resentful and burned out. So you aren't being a good steward of your team. And then also like you're probably don't feel good and feelings kind of frustrated and resentful and all of that. So it's in this guise of like kindness, like you're trying to let things slide because you don't want to have to tell the person it's not a good fit or give them really tough feedback. You don't want to hurt their feelings. But Kim Scott says this, but she says, clarity is kind. Honesty is kind. So we have to be honest, and you don't have to be, a jerk about it, but you can be honest in a kind and respectful way so that if this person can ultimately find what's best for them and you can do what's best for the team and be a good steward of your team. that person, just because they're not performing well in this specific role, doesn't mean they won't kill it somewhere else. But sometimes they need a little push to make that happen. Taking responsibility for your energy. This one's a big one. So especially when you're in a leadership role, you kind of set the tone for your team. And we all know this. We've worked for bosses where they come into the office, and if they are like, have a storm cloud above their head and they're on a rampage, or if they're just aloof and distant, it kind of makes everyone is looking at the leader and kind of reading how they're feeling. I might have something I want to talk to them about, or I need their feedback on. Well, now's not a good day. You don't want to go in and talk to Carlyn today because she's in a mood, so we have to take responsibility for the energy that we bring in to every environment we show up in, especially though, if you're leading a team, because it's contagious. Energy is contagious. That's science. And it's if we come in with a positive energy, or we come in with an open energy, and you don't always have to be like bouncing off the walls, because that's not realistic, but even just a calm, open energy, a calm, kind energy, that you're approachable, that people feel that they can connect with you or share things with you. That's what we're aiming for as a leader. And if you want to bring, your energy and fun and exuberance as well, that's fantastic. But we don't expect people to be able to show up like that 100% of the time. But how can you show up like clear and open and kind? And I think, again, this comes back to taking care. You've got to take care of your own energy so you can give it away. So you have to do things that fill you up. You have to get some sunshine, or you have to be able to say a prayer, or you have to read a book, like whatever it is for you, you have to do that, because it is crucial that the energy you bring in with your team is something that brings the best out of people, that makes them feel safe, that makes them feel like they can contribute, that even lifts them up if they're not in the best place. If you do that, I know sometimes we have a hard time taking time for ourselves, but really, truly, it's the best investment you can make for your team. Because if you do that and you show up in that way, it's going to pay off hugely for your people. They're going to enjoy their lives so much more. They're going to be able to contribute more. They're going to feel uplifted by you rather than drained by you. The last one I said is practicing discernment. So this is another thing that I think is really hard as a leader. And I still, I struggle. Well, first of all, I practice all of these. Like I said at the beginning, like no one is an expert. This is life. Life is constantly teaching us and throwing us curveballs. And just when we think we figured it out, something pops up and we realize we have something new to learn. But discernment is a word that I think is one of the biggest words that embodies what a leader needs to do, because we take so much responsibility for how we steward our teams and how we take care of our people, that we can sometimes also take on too much responsibility for their reactions to honest feedback, for things that we cannot control. We can't ultimately make people perform, or make people care, or make people see things, see objective truth. We should do all we can, and then we need to let it go. We cannot force other people to respond in the ways that we hope that they will. And there are times and still to this day, where let's say like I have a tough feedback conversation with somebody and they walk away and they're really upset or even pissed at me. And I take that on. I can't sleep. I'm taking on their feelings like, oh man, I made them feel so angry, blah, blah, blah. But I have to come back to, did I enter that conversation with the best of intentions? Did I tell the truth? Was I honest? Was I living into my values? Check, check, check. If I can check all those three things off, then I have to tell myself, go to sleep, Carlyn, go to sleep. Let your head hit the pillow, because even if they're upset or angry or it didn't land or whatever, you cannot control, these are relationships. You can only own your side of the street. And so we should care about our people. We should do everything we can to support them, but we also cannot take on the stress and the heartache and the disappointment of if it's not received well, or if they don't get it at first, or if they see things in a different way. That's okay. Everybody has their own perspective. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, this one is lead with love, and it sounds soft, but it's not easy to do. And not a lot of leaders, in traditional sense, corporate environments, which I'm in, talk a lot about love, but I do. And probably because of, like I shared with you what my values are and how I show up, I think love, ultimately there's love and fear in this life. You either show up from a place of love, you show up from a place of fear. I think leading with love is so powerful. So what does that mean? Like, love just really means being willing to put other people's interests ahead of your own. So, this means like being the kind of leader that doesn't take credit for things, but gives credit away. And I think we jumped to the wrong slide. If we can go back to the one that says lead with love, but putting people first, that's what I mean by that. So like lifting them up, not taking the credit for things, making sure that they get the spotlight, that they get the recognition, that you take care of their needs, that, like, for example, I was just at an event. I'm a director of a leadership program, and we were at our graduation last week, and I have an employee who's pregnant. And this is just a little example, but she was supposed to lead our team building Jeopardy thing, but she's getting really anxious and she's pregnant, and it made her nervous to have her blood pressure go up. And I was so grateful she felt comfortable, first of all, sharing that with me a few days before, because most employees would keep that in, like, I already committed to this. It's only a few days before. My boss is running this event. But she came to me and said, hey, I'm having this anxiety. I'm having my blood pressure elevate. I just don't feel comfortable doing this. And I said, that's okay. Like, I'll take it. And honestly, I was really uncomfortable doing it in the moment, because I was like, oh man, I don't even know how Jeopardy works. I haven't prepared for this. I don't know the questions and answers. And I did have a lot of other things on my plate, but I did it for her. And I was happy to do it for her because, and I felt glad that she felt comfortable sharing that with me. And also I ended up having a blast doing it. It was so much fun. So it's literally just taking care of them, their needs, and also lifting them up. And when they have a big win or they do something great, making sure other people see it. The flip side of that is sometimes like we have to take the hits. So ideally, and I think Google's Building Better Bosses talked about being the kind of leader that gets people out of the way of the bus before the bus hits. But if you can't do that, if you can't get there in time and the bus comes, stepping in front of them. And so sometimes we do that as leaders. So let's say somebody on my team makes a mistake, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. So they might've made a mistake, but people are asking me, Carlyn, why did this happen? Or why did this get published or something like that? And I never say, oh, Sally did that, never, ever, ever. It's the best way to lose trust. And it's just part of the responsibility of leadership. And it's something that strengthens your character, being able to say, oh, that was us. Sorry, that was on me. I should have caught it. I didn't. And we already have, all you can do is own it. You can learn from it. So demonstrate you've learned from the mistake, that you have a plan in place, that you're going to do things differently the next time. And that's it. That's all you can do. And let it go, because we all make mistakes. Acting with compassion. I think I've already kind of explained a lot of this, but just being compassionate with our actions and our words, when people do make mistakes that make you, like, let's say someone makes a mistake and it makes you look bad. We're all human. We don't like that. It's not fun to feel like, oh crap, well, that just made me look like an idiot or whatever. But it's getting over, again, our initial emotional response that comes from an ego place. Like, how do you look to someone else, which is totally natural and normal. We all have that response, but don't act from that place. Don't act from that place of like annoyed or frustrated or insecure. Take a second, let yourself feel it, get it out, maybe even rant, talk to your partner, whoever. But when you talk with your employee, come from a place of compassion. So come from a place of, you've been that person. We've all been that person who made a mistake and already feels terrible about it and doesn't want to make their boss look bad. And so come to them there and say, hey, I've been there. That connection. Hey, I've been there. I've done it. Do you know what you're going to do differently? Yep. Okay, cool. It's done. It's over. Let's move on. Let's look forward. Being intentionally inclusive and equitable. So this one is, I think thankfully we have a ton of conversation happening right now around inclusion and equity in our organizations, and it's overdue and it's very important. So many of us, like I said at the beginning of the call, we all are from different backgrounds. We're different colors. We have different life experiences, different socioeconomic upbringings. We have all of this amazing things that make us so different and so interesting and so rich. And ideally, you have a lot of this in your organization. You have a lot of diversity on your team. And that's a good thing. We all can learn from each other. And so creating an environment based on trust and openness, where you are vulnerable and honest, where you admit your own mistakes, so you make it comfortable for others to admit theirs, where other people feel like they can show up authentically, where you ask questions and you get curious, especially if employees are different than you, where you intentionally make sure we all have something called like proximity bias, and that what like all kinds of different biases that we're just, our brains are wired to from, back when we were surviving and living in different tribes. We feared the other, and we gravitated toward people who are just like us. It's natural. Like you connect with someone, you're like, I feel like I've known them forever. And you might have similar backgrounds or similar, it's natural. It's a little harder to connect with people who are different from you. But in my experience, it's one of the most rewarding things. And you learn more from people who are different from you. And if you can find common ground with almost anyone, because we're all humans at the end of the day. We all have a lot of the same drives and desires and fears. And so if you can find that place of common ground with all of your people, make sure that you're including everyone, so that you especially, if you have folks close or at a distance or virtually in person, how do you create genuine connection and give everybody time and visibility and the opportunity to share and connect with each other and with you? Sometimes you have to be really intentional about that. I think her name is Renee Myers. She's a really wonderful advocate and teacher in this field. And she says, if you are not being intentionally inclusive, you are being accidentally exclusive. And that always stuck with me, because I don't think any of us have the intention of making anyone feel on the outside, but it happens if we're not really intentional. Sometimes you can look at your team and say, oh yeah, like I don't ask this person to go to lunch as much, or I don't spend as much time connecting with them one-on-one because they're kind of quiet. I guess I just assume they don't really want to talk, so those kinds of things. Just, making sure that we're being intentional about how we are including everybody, and equitable. So how are we spreading out opportunities, work, balance, support? Are you being equitable in terms of, does everybody have access to, does everyone have the same expectations? Does everybody know what their expectations are? They're comfortable with them. They're playing by the same rules, and they have the same access to opportunities. It doesn't mean they all get the same opportunities, but they all have access. And then if they perform and show up and they earn them, then they get them. Somebody just asked if I could restate the quote, so I will. And it's from Renee Myers. It's not me. She says, if you are not being intentionally inclusive, you are probably being accidentally exclusive. I hope you got that, because that one sticks with me too. And then this last point on this slide, I have, don't let hurt harden you. So this goes back to, it kind of, I guess, is all rooted in authenticity and being, knowing who you are, knowing what kind of leader you want to be and what values you want to embody. So I have always been the type of leader. Oh, what a nice note from Amy. Oh my goodness, you guys are so sweet. But I've always been the type of leader who wanted to create an environment that I would want to work in and that others would want to work in. And so even before COVID, one of the bright spots to come from COVID, and there were so many tragic things, but one of the bright spots, I think, has been this emphasis on more balance and giving people more autonomy to run their lives, work from home, work from the office. I did a lot of those types of things before COVID, and especially before it was popular in my industry in corporate America. And I would give a lot of freedom and autonomy. And the reason I did that is because I wanted it. That was the kind of leader I wanted to be. I believed it brought the best out in people. If people, lived up to expectations and responsibility and things like that. But there were times that I had situations where, we had performance issues or folks that weren't showing up in the ways that they were expected to. And those conversations were tough. And there were times that, I was blamed, or my leadership style was blamed for those situations. And I had to do a lot of self-reflection on, okay, usually when you get feedback, there's some truth to it. There's truth in there. And then there's also there's different perspectives. So usually there's probably some things in that feedback you can't see that is true. And then there's some things that you're like, nah, that's not it. So there was some truth in that feedback of okay, maybe I can be better about really communicating my expectations. Maybe some things that I assumed people understood were not understood. And so I took that away. I need to communicate more about what this type of environment means and what the expectations are. I need to be better about making sure people understand that. However, I don't want to change the fact that I offer this kind of flexibility to my team. I don't want to be a different kind of leader. And I had people say to me, like, see, doesn't this make you see, you can't trust people, or see, you shouldn't be da da da. And I was like, no, absolutely not. I can't go through life that way, or leadership that way, of like, you're going to have people in all life and all different situations who do different things. And some people are always going to do the right thing. Some people make mistakes. We all make mistakes sometimes. But just because like you have situations arise that don't go the way you hope they would, you have to think about, do I want to change? Do I still have this value? Okay. Do I still believe in it? Do I still want to lead this way? Do I still want to have an open heart? Do I still want to be empathetic? Yes. All right, perfect. Then let's keep doing that. But then let's also make sure, we're hiring people who understand the expectations, and I'm doing my best as a leader to communicate those and get in front of any issues before they happen. So not letting, sometimes, just like anything in life, like a bad breakup, or something happens and then you aren't as open to your next relationship. I think it's the same with leadership. Sometimes you can have tough experiences with employees, and it leaves you feeling like more bitter or hardened. And in those situations, you have a choice. Like, you can let things close you off and embitter you, or you can become better. You could get bitter or you get better. I think somebody else awesome said that. But if you choose to get better and stay open, then that's it's not easy. It's like, it takes real strength to do that, to take the hits when they come, to learn from them, to know what you could have done better, but to ultimately decide to remain open and empathetic and continue to live into your values and not change them or abandon them because you've been hurt. If we go to the next slide, please. Allow yourself to be human. So this is the big one, because like I said, I think speaking of expectations, we as women put so many expectations on ourselves, and then there are so many expectations put on leaders. And one of the things that I like, this mantra that I came up with, this first bullet, and I kind of try to remind myself of it, is strive for grace and not perfection. So I'm not striving to be perfect. I'm striving to give myself more grace. I try to remind myself of that every time I make a mistake. How can I be more graceful? Not how can I be more perfect? Not how can I never make a mistake again, but how can I be more resilient in how I respond to the mistakes I make? That's what I'm trying to learn to live. And again, I'm a people pleaser. I'm someone who, finds a lot of self-worth and all of that based on what I achieve, what I do right. If I do something wrong, it can be really hard to admit mistakes if you were raised in a way in which when you did make a mistake, you were less lovable, or you were not as competent, or your whole character was called into question when you made a mistake, rather than receiving love and understanding and connection when you made a mistake. So if you are someone that did not receive that kind of love, I think that's most of us at some point or another. And so we're very hard on ourselves. And I noticed this. I noticed whenever I make a mistake or I learn something new, instead of being like so grateful for the new information and knowledge, like, oh my gosh, now I know this, whether it's even like something, how I can change, my nutrition or how I nourish my body or things like that, how I take care of myself. If I learn a new thing, the first reaction I have, honestly, is regret, not gratitude. I learned something new and I'm like, I regret, or I feel shame that I wasn't doing that before, or I should have been doing that before. I've made mistake. I think of all the ways that I've made a mistake because I didn't know that or have that information, rather than how cool, I learned something new that can inform how I show up going forward. And I noticed that in myself, and I'm like, this is a problem, because like, there's no way we come into this world, we are a blank slate. And then we learn through our experiences. And sometimes we learn the wrong things, and then we have to unlearn them as adults, which is really tough. And then we learn new information. And if we are constantly putting ourselves on trial every time we make a mistake, or shaming ourselves every time we learn something new, like, oh my God, you might as well never learn anything new. Like, you become resistant to new information, and you just start to defend and dig your heels into exactly where you are, because God forbid you admit that you might be able to change or evolve or grow in some way. And I don't want to be that kind of person. So I have to push myself and be more graceful to myself, and say, and be excited and celebrate the fact that I'm someone who wants to continue to learn, and who wants to continue to be strong enough to admit my mistakes and grow from them. And that deserves to be celebrated. And I should, every time I make a mistake, not say I'm terrible because of this mistake, but how awesome that I can acknowledge I made that mistake and I can grow from it. I'm so glad I'm that kind of person. It's like flipping the narrative. And then sharing mistakes and learning from them. So like the mistakes that you do make, and we all make a ton, what did you learn? And being open about that, and having, there's a lot of talk about growth mindset these days, which is all about, embracing failure, because if you fail at something, then it means you tried something new and you're learning. Trading rumination for resiliency. So this is a big one. Like we all tend to ruminate quite a bit. Our brains are actually wired to focus more on the negative than the positive. So the reason they're wired this way, it's like an old evolutionary tool. So to keep us from danger, to keep us from making the same mistake twice, because your life could be at stake, but that's not the case in our modern world most of the time. So what your brain does is you might have 10 positive interactions in a day where everybody just, was so affirming and wonderful. And then you might have one negative interaction where somebody made you feel stupid or whatever it might be. And which one do we sit and think about, right? At night, like which one do we sit and think about? Do we think about those 10 or do we think about that one? And if we can acknowledge our brains work like this, we can be more intentional about changing that. So there's a ratio, it's 3-to-1. So if you want to try to create 3 and focus on 3 positive interactions or 3 uplifting or nourishing interactions or experiences to 1 negative. And it's going to take about a 3-to-1 to like start to shift your thinking. So if you're always thinking about the negative, rumination it's when you're not really solving a problem. It's when you keep thinking about something and it causes anxiety. Anxiety and rumination are really connected. You keep thinking about something, it's like a problem with no solution. So you're not problem solving, but you made a mistake, someone made you feel dumb, and all you keep thinking about is how angry you are at that person. How dare they? Oh my gosh, how stupid am I? How embarrassed am I? I can never look these people in the eye again. You start to think just all these negative things, this thought loop, and you're not really solving the problem. Problem solving looks like, resilience looks like, instead of that, resilience looks like noticing that, because we all do it. Okay, I'm noticing, like all I'm doing is I'm feeling like crap. My thoughts are fueling my feeling and it's not getting me anywhere. And it's interrupting that. And sometimes I literally have to write down, okay, this is what happened. Like, what did I learn from it? What am I going to do differently? Is there anything to learn or do differently? What's the next right action I can take? And if I get clear on what I learned, what I can do different, the next right action I need to take for peace in my soul, just to have peace, whether it's I need to apologize or whether it's I need to communicate how that person made me feel to them in a helpful way, like once I've processed my emotions, like I need to go back to that. Maybe somebody did something that was disrespectful or rude, and you feel the need that you need to kind of communicate that to them and tell them like how you'd like to be treated in the future and why, when this happened, how it made you feel and how you'd like those interactions to be in the future, those kinds of things. Once I get clear on that, then I have to tell myself, okay, I've problem solved. Anything beyond this is rumination. Once you solve the problem, once you have a solution or a next step in place, and that might even look like talking to your partner or your friends or whoever, or your mentor for guidance. And then once you have that done, then you got to let it go. And you've got to start to build yourself back up and look forward and think about what you need to do next. Staying curious. So this is just kind of aligned with what I've been saying, but just continually being curious. You're never done learning about yourself or the world or the people around you. And if we stay with that kind of curiosity rather than a pressure to always get it right, but just curious, oh my gosh, what is this challenge teaching me? What can I learn from this person? All of those kinds of things. Then we can continue to grow and discover more about ourselves. And when we discover more about ourselves and we are more comfortable with who we are, we become more authentic. And then this is a big one, but as you are in your careers, and I'm sure all of you are badass women who are doing big things or are going to do big things. And I think just staying, I always say, the higher you climb, the more humble you need to be. So the higher you go, the more humble we should be. And I think sometimes those get inverted, or you see people reach a certain level in the org chart, and then they start to, they kind of, their ego starts to attach to the role or attach to the identity, and it changes how they treat people. And I think, we want to be the people that say about us, not like that we really, believed our own BS and we got to a certain level and we thought we were above other people. But I think most of us want to be the kind of people who people look back on and say, every time I talk to her, she made me feel like I never felt any kind of way. I never felt like she was trying to do, make me feel less than. I always felt important. I always felt seen or heard or understood. And, I'm not a big deal by any means, but if I ever get to those levels of leadership, if that's in my destiny or not, it's fine. I'm fine either way. But if I get to that level, I hope and pray that I just get humbler and humbler rather than the other way around. And if we could go to the last slide. So I just want to kind of end with a couple of thoughts. This is me and my daughter. That's my daughter, Evie. But I love that. I wanted to include this picture, especially during Women's History Month, when we think about like our legacy and what we're leaving. And so every time more of us step into our own freedom and authenticity, every time we allow ourselves to truly love ourselves, I know it's oversaid, but it's so true. But like, if we really, really allow ourselves and give ourselves permission to love ourselves and to care for ourselves and to believe in ourselves, like, and really get to actually like who we are, and we show up in that way, we give other people that permission as well. Other people see that and they think like, oh, maybe like I can be me too. And, and it's inspiring. We all love being around people like that. And so I just hope and pray that we can continue to practice some of these things and more things in our lives that help us show up in this way, so we can all be happier and freer and more authentic and more powerful. And by powerful, I mean powerful in the real way, like not in power over others, but power from within. And then if we do that, this is how we will raise our daughters, and we won't raise them by trying to turn them into the people we wish we were. We will raise them by being the people we want to be, and them seeing that, and then they can be who they are and who they want to be. And that's what I hope and pray that I can do for my daughter, and what we can all do for ourselves, our colleagues, our peers, our family, and our friends. So that's my whole talk. I am so grateful and thankful for you all listening, and I can't wait to chat if we want to open it up for questions.
Well, thank you so much, Carlyn, for that fantastic presentation. And as a reminder, if somebody would like to ask Carlyn a live question, you can just raise your hand and I can unmute you to ask a live question. But please keep those questions coming into the chat, and also to our website chat. So while we are going through some of the questions in the chat, I'm going to start with one that came in on our website. So this one says, how do you show empathy and compassion without being seen as a pushover?
Good question. Good question. I think this is constantly like a balance that we're trying to walk. And I always admire leaders. Like one of the things a phrase I said in the presentation is this balance of empathy with accountability. And so I try to embody that, which is like, it's very easy for people to misinterpret empathy as weakness. And same with vulnerability. It's very easy to misinterpret that as weakness. And so I think what it is, again, for me, I don't really, I guess, care if because people are going to have their own perceptions rooted in their own life experience or insecurity or whatever it might be that could view vulnerability as weakness, for example, or empathy as weakness. I feel like I can't concern myself with that. Like I can't concern myself if people see that as weak, because again, like then I'm not being authentic. If I'm worried about what other people think, I can't show up. And my value is I want to be empathetic. The other thing is I want to also hold people accountable for the benefit. So I'm a good steward to my team, to myself, like respecting myself, respecting my team, respecting the individual that might, need some honest or tough feedback. And so I think by doing that, and even when I do give, tough feedback, coming from a place of I'm telling you this because I care about you, the team, about, this relationship, being fair and equitable and, everybody getting out of this, what we want to get out of it. So I try to practice holding people accountable because I need to, and that's my tough thing. And then I think people respect that, like when they see you do both. So when they see that you are willing to have tough conversations and hold people accountable, but you do it from a place of care, of genuine care for the team, for the individual, for the person, then you're still living into that empathy, but you're also not letting it keep you from being honest with people, which is ultimately the empathetic thing to do, because people need honesty to grow. So, and then if people still like view you as a pushover or whatever, I just don't care. I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's just true.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I'm going to see if we can take a live question. So, Marie, can you ask a live question?
Yes. I appreciate this presentation 100%. I work in finance, so it's no gray area. And I have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization to protect the assets of the organization. Mm-hmm. I am viewed as too direct. Mm-hmm. And it's no accountability for people who gaslight and do not represent their selves the correct way. I'm basically tired of looking at synonyms to try to approach people in meetings to get them to understand that they have to be accountable for their own actions. Mm-hmm. So if you can get any guidance to that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah. And, I will reiterate again, I'm going to give my best honest answer, but this is just what I have to offer. And I'm sure a lot of people would have wisdom on this, but for me, I really respect and admire women who are direct, because like I said, I tend to be more of the like people pleaser talking around things. And I've had to learn how to be more direct. So first of all, I think it's awesome that you are that way. I think sometimes, I get it. Like for you're tired of like, okay, can I just give the person like, this is the truth. Can I just hit them with the truth? And some people are going to really respond well to that and they can take it. And other people are going to get their feelings hurt. And so, I think it's up to you, if you can do it authentically. But I think for me, what really helps me when I'm having a tough conversation and I have to be direct, which is not my strength, but when I have to do it, I always try to start my conversation with my intention, with the why. So people understand right away, why am I having this conversation? It's not because like I want to be a jerk or make you feel bad or anything like that. It's like you said, you have a fiduciary responsibility. So when you're talking to someone, it's like, hey, listen, I'm having this conversation because this is my responsibility. If I don't have this conversation, I'm not doing my job. And I also care about you and I want you to be successful. If people can feel that you genuinely care about them, or you genuinely like have respect for them as another person, individual, like you want them to be successful. You're not trying to just point out what they did wrong, but you're like, hey, I want to do my job and I want you to I want you to shine. I want you to do your job so you can feel good about it. I want to give you the information you need. So like the feedback you need to make sure you're doing everything that you want and need to do for our company. So if you can kind of start any tough conversation with intention setting, like communicating your intention behind it, I think people are, and even say, this may be tough. Like, I'm just asking, can you hang in here with me? I'm going to give you some feedback. Can you hang in there and really listen? And then let's talk about it. And even giving them that warning of like, okay, like take a breath, like this might be tough to hear, but here's why I'm telling you. And if it's coming from a place where they can feel like you have respect for them and they're not, if you can keep them from getting on the defense right away, if you can sort of help lower their guard a little bit. And I'm not saying you have to like sugarcoat it and talk around it, but just set the intention, and you can be pretty direct in the way you do that. But, try to be, have that compassion to frame the conversation. And I think that may serve you in getting people to respond potentially better. You may do all of that and they still may have a bad reaction. So, I think all you can do is do the best you can to help your feedback be received. You can try to help it be received in the best possible way. And then at the end of the day, how they receive it is really their responsibility. So that's the best I can do. And I think, but do that in a way that feels authentic to you. Like, don't, If you feel like you don't really mean it and you're just trying to talk around it or say it's not going to be received well. And I think just like I need to learn to be more direct like you, it's like maybe if you can think about, well, how can I, in a way that feels authentic to me, approach these conversations in a way where I might be heard a little bit better by the other person. And maybe that's something that would serve you in those situations, just something to think about. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, we've had a lot of questions in the chat about authenticity and also a lot about work-life balance. So I think we'll do 2 more questions before we wrap for the afternoon. So I'm going to go with this question from Marquita. Marquita said, how do you practice self-care, authenticity, and avoiding burnout when you're overworking and stress is innate in your job's environment?
Really good question. I don't know your exact situation, but I'm trying to just think how I can really respond in the best way. I think that there are some things inherent in certain jobs that are really stressful. And if you are first of all, if you are in an industry like that, like, I think that's part of, are you in a place where you can thrive and feel good? And I know this may be a privilege of not all of us have a ton of opportunities, but you might have more than you think. And so I think my first question would be, are you in an environment where you are, where you can thrive, where you can feel good, like where you have enough, the onus or are you empowered to make some changes within that environment that would help you perform better and feel better? If not, if you're like, I'm like, the place I'm in is just terrible. And like, I'm stressed out all the time. My adrenals are shot. My hair's falling out. If you're in that kind of an environment, then the other question is like, do you want to be there? And do you have the ability and, the opportunity to maybe look around for something else? And I know that's a privilege and we're all busy and we're trying to provide for our families. So if you can change your environment and you want to, it's worth asking yourself if that's something you want to do. With that said, if you're in an environment, you're like, no, like, I don't want to leave or I can't leave. Like, I've got to make the best of the situation I'm in. So I think what you have to do is, there's this really awesome cognitive behavioral therapy technique that I love. It's called you versus the universe, or you could put like you versus my job environment, my work environment, me versus my work environment. And in the me or the you me column, what's all the things you can control? What are some things you could do to make your situation better? In the other column, you put all the crap that like you cannot control, the things that are totally out of your control. But in the column that is in your control, it might be things like, okay, do I have to be on every meeting? Can I block my calendar every now and then to give myself some mental health time? When are my busy seasons and my lighter seasons? And how can I make sure that when I'm in the busy seasons of my job, like, what are the things I can put in place to support me through that? Relationships. Is part of the reason you're so stressed at work because of a bad relationship or a conversation you really need to have that you haven't had yet? Maybe that goes in the you column. So I think if you could maybe do that exercise, reflect and think, what do I need? Why am I burned out? Is it relationship related? Is it time? Is it the fact that I can't take care of myself? Well, what do you most need to take care of yourself that would fill you up? Like, sometimes, like, it can literally be 5 minutes. It can be 5 minutes of getting off of your computer and walking outside and taking a few conscious breaths and like letting the sunlight hit you can really just help you if that's all you can do for yourself. And different people get filled up in different ways. So if you're really burned out, like, what is it for you? What fills your cup back up? And how do you make sure that you are giving yourself enough of what it is that you need, or as much of what you need as possible? And then I think also have grace for yourself, like, give yourself some grace, because life is far from perfect. And if you are in a bad situation or a stressful environment and you are doing your best, and some days it's just really hard and some days you feel really burned out, then just love on yourself and be like, you know what? Like, let's say Sue, my name is Sue. You know what, Sue, like, look at everything you're doing. Look at everything you're doing and look at how you're trying to do it for your family or for this or that, all the reasons you're doing it. If you can reconnect to your why am I doing this? Well, I'm taking care of my family. I'm making sure they have what they need. Like, reconnect to the why and root it so you feel rooted in the purpose of, even if your job doesn't always feel purposeful, you have a purpose for why you're doing it. So reconnect to that. And then also just give yourself a lot of love and grace. And, because I know a lot of really amazing, wonderful people. And for example, my father-in-law's one. He came from, poverty. He was actually in a cult, or it's like a religious organization for a while. That was, cult's probably not the PC term, but a really kind of messed up situation. Finally got out, finally decided to go back and get his degree. So he was working nights at a motel. He got mugged. He was going to school, working, and literally not sleeping for years to provide for his family. And it's I think of people who've done things like that for their people they love. And I think, my God, sometimes you're just in a season like that. And all you can do is say, oh my gosh, I am reconnect to the why and love on yourself, have compassion, and lean as much as you can on people who can help you and support you. If you have a community around you that can help you and uplift you or help in any way you need, sometimes we need to ask for help more. So I hope that's helpful. There are no cut and dry answers. I think it'd be silly to act like there are, but there are usually some things we can do. And sometimes it's, asking for help or giving ourselves grace and just recognizing that we're in a really tough season and finding and reconnecting to the purpose of why we're slogging through it.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, okay, we're going to have to do 2 more questions. One's easy. This one came from Michelle. And Michelle said, what was the name of the book that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation?
Okay. So I think I mentioned Brene Brown. She's got 1,000,001 books. There's one specific to leadership called Dare to Lead, which I think is fantastic. I also mentioned Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. Yeah, I love books and reading. There's so many, I think. And I will also say any sort of personal development book, that helps you kind of find more of a sense of ease and peace with yourself and within yourself will help you as a leader. So anything you can do to kind of feed your soul and develop more self-awareness will help you as a leader, in my opinion.
Well, that's wonderful. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for those fabulous questions. I think we just have time for one more this afternoon. I'm going to read this one from Emma. And Emma says, how do you teach your employees to feel safe and be vulnerable in the workplace, but also teach the professional behavior of leaving certain situations at home and having a positive attitude at work despite home life?
That's a good question. And I'm sorry, I always pause because I want to make sure I'm responding. Okay, so this one is tough, and again, really nuanced. So what I would say is I think making sure that they know the appropriate, for example, for me with my employees, I want them to be able to, if they need to, let me know or vent to me about what's happening for them personally. Because as much as we would like to think people don't, or we would like ourselves to not bring the personal into work, we aren't robots. We can't just walk into the doors of the office and forget about our problems or not have them weigh on us. And I think it's an unrealistic expectation of ourselves or other people to expect people to do that. So, sometimes people are working through it on their own, but I think making sure, for my folks, I've tried to build real relationships with them where they feel that they can talk to me about personal things if they need and want to. I never want them to feel, and again, this is the nuance, I never want them to feel uncomfortable or they need to share more than they're comfortable sharing with me. But I want them to know that I'm there for them if they need support or anything is going on. So for example, the example I gave about my employee who's pregnant right now, I was really happy she felt comfortable sharing that with me, that she's having this anxiety, it's elevating her blood pressure, it's making her worry about her baby. Those are things that I want to make sure I've created a relationship where she can talk to me about things like that. It doesn't mean I'm pressing her or prying, or she's telling everybody under the sun about every baby appointment she's having. I also think most of the time we tend to hold back more than we overshare. You may have an oversharer who's going above and saying, so for that, in that case, I would say, hey, just and again, it's the intention setting. I think it's wonderful that you feel like you can be vulnerable and open up, But, in these situations may not be the best time or place, and here's why. But you and I have a personal relationship or friendship. If you want to talk to me, you can always talk to me. Or maybe they have friends on the team, and like, I know you and Susie are really close and you're great friends. Like, just maybe you two could, like, if you want to go to lunch and share that, that's totally fine. So if you have someone that's oversharing and making people uncomfortable, or, I think that's usually people kind of are more close to the vest. But if that is the case, you could just explain why this isn't the best like environment necessarily, and that if she wants to share, or like, that you're there for her and you would be more than willing to listen if she wants to chat with you. Or if you don't want to listen to it, then you could recommend, like, hey, I know when I was going through some really tough times, and I wanted to get things off my chest, like I went and saw a counselor, and I have some names, or I have some recommendations I could, or I really leaned on my family and my friends, and so I would encourage you to do the same. So I think just not shaming them or making them feel embarrassed about the fact that they're sharing, but just helping redirect it so that they're doing it in a way that's in an appropriate environment, I think would be helpful.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, Carlyn, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Sure. I wanted to say too, if anybody wants to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. So Carlyn Lynch Schofield, I go by both names still. So you might find me Carlyn Lynch or Carlyn Schofield, but you're more than welcome to reach out. And again, like it was so nice connecting with you guys. And I wish you the best day and the best Women's History Month. So thanks for letting me be here.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you to Carlyn for her wonderful words. And thank you to all our viewers today. Without all of you, these events would not be possible. Sorry that we could not get to all your wonderful questions this afternoon. So let's continue to support women's leadership and learn from one another. So be safe, be kind to yourselves, and be well. So until next time, this is Ginger Whatley signing off. Have a great afternoon, everyone.